The STP, they've got two ways of entry. So you have direct entry, and this is where anybody, as long as they meet the educational requirements, they can all apply for this one. So the first year, it's almost sort of like an introductory rotational year. So you do rotations in embryology and andrology. So, and then there's a whole list of training activities, which are a combination of, observational things. The second and third years, they are a lot more clinically based, relevant specifically to embryology. So you would be expected to learn, lab procedures such as collections, fertilization check, talking to patients. I also do temperature mapping in the lab itself. This is just for the heated stages and also the ICSI rigs. So we tend to do this every quarter.
Welcome back, Mary, to another episode of Let's Talk Embryology. To those who haven't listened to Mary first, so we have already released part 1 of this episode. This is going to be part 2, where we will be talking about Mary's experience of STP and also few other questions that we have for her. So going back to your journey into IVF career, Mary. So you said you did STP, which is Scientist Training Program offered by NHS. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, so I did the in-service route. I had been in my clinic for a few years, and they already had a few students who had either completed it or nearly finishing. And I got to start in 2022. And I was the first, I guess, intake to start a new curriculum as well. They revised all the sort of modules, and they decided to, which I think it's been like a good improvement compared to the previous one. Like it was just a bit more relevant and more tailored to what was more supportive. And yeah, we started a new curriculum. And in terms of how it went, I thought it went really well. So yeah, I had there's obviously, tough. There's lots of things you have to do, but it was quite structured. And by it being a 3-year course, you sort of knew there was an end in sight. There was like a completion date where you thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to work really hard. And at the end, I'll hopefully get my certificate of completion, and I can also join the register.
Right. You said you joined through the in-service route. Can you tell us what that route is, and is there any other route that you can join STP through?
Yep. So the STP, they've got two modes of entry. So you have direct entry, and this is where anybody, as long as they meet the educational requirements, they can all apply for this one. And it will be depending on what the allocation is for that year. The NHS will have clinics where I don't know if you find out when you apply where they are, but definitely in the process of applying, you will know how many positions are available and which clinics they are in the country. And so that would be the direct entry route. You have to complete a sort of aptitude test and provide some questions, and a bit like not quite a personal statement, but there's a few questions about, for example, like why do you want to do it, and how can you meet the requirements. And then when you go in service, it means that your clinic is a registered training centre. Some clinics, they can take direct and in service, just depends on what the agreements are. But normally in service, it will be for staff that already work there. The clinic will apply to put you forward to go on for training. And if all the funding's approved, then you can go with your clinic in service. And it's less competitive because in theory, you've already been, interviewed and selected, and they want to put you forward to do it. So it's a slightly, I wouldn't say easier process, but definitely like less nerve-wracking because you already know that you're going to get a spot, versus the direct entry where you have to wait first to find out if you've been longlisted. And then there's also the shortlisting, and then there would be an interview with the clinic as well. So there's a few more steps with direct entry, and it's a lot more competitive as well. So, but
Right.
both of them do the STP in the exact same way. Like once you're at your clinic, there's no differences. You would do your work-based training, and then you'd also complete a part-time masters, which is based in Manchester.
Right, right. Do you think in-service route is much more better than the direct route since you already have your training, some of your training in the lab, and then you get into STP? So did that prior training get before getting into STP helped you in any way?
Oh yeah, I definitely would say I wouldn't say back to your question about which one did you say was it better? I'd say it depends really on your circumstances and whether you can. So not every clinic will also be available to run an in-service route, and so you might be trained in a lot of procedures, but at that stage, your only option to get on might have to be through direct entry. So in terms of which ones better over the other, I'd say it really depends on your circumstances and what your clinic has available for you. But from the perspective of somebody that went in service in their clinic and had a few years of training, that definitely benefited me because I guess it's not just about the clinical workload, but it's understanding as an IVF unit how it runs and all the different teams working together. I had a lot of insight for, how does the clinical nursing team, admin team, all of their roles and what they have to do before the patients get to us in the lab. I had a lot more understanding about just complex cases that we see, and as well, like all the really important regulatory requirements that we had to have in place for all licensed centres. And I think compared to maybe someone that didn't have any experience in the 3 years, it's a lot to take on in conjunction with also doing the clinical work too, and also the masters and all of the other assessments you have to do, because it's a lot, but it's definitely doable. But I felt by having the extra experience in clinic, it definitely took a lot of the pressure off. And I think that definitely led me to have quite a positive, like a really positive experience. And I thought it was very manageable. But that was my perspective. I'm not sure what others would feel
Right.
having done so. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Can you also tell us what did you study in each of the STPs? So it's a 3-year program. So what did you do in the first year, second year, and third year?
Oh yeah. So the first year, it's almost sort of like an introductory rotational year. So you do rotations in embryology and andrology. And then there's a whole list of training activities, which are a combination of, observational things. They have different themes on the school website and also on OneFile, but there's considerations that you need to do to meet the requirements to complete them. And a lot of it is also reflective practice and also shadowing. So in your first year, it's sort of, I guess, sort of inducting you into how does a clinic run? You get to do a lot of shadowing. You do some training as well, but it's meant to be just uh, the easier of the years in the sense that it's not very clinical based. It's more learning, watching, and lots of reading, background reading. And you also get to do some extra rotations in genetic counselling and also genomics as well. And that fits in really nicely with embryology because for a lot of our patients, they undergo counselling, especially with patients that are seeking genetic testing, so such as PGT, or patients that they may have found that there is a genetic disorder that they weren't aware of. All of those disciplines they fit in with IVF, not necessarily directly, but they would have played an important part in either the background work or the counselling that they need before they can even consider treatment. And it's also like ongoing as their treatment progresses. So it was really nice. I got to go to another hospital to do some shadowing, and another one it was all remotely. But we got to see, examples of cases and disorders and how they would manage that. And not all of it led to we'd recommend IVF treatment and PGT, but it was really fascinating to see how, like, these wide arrays of disorders are managed with patients. So yeah, the first year was very much really good insight, and there's still like lots of work and training activities to complete. And obviously Manchester, you go to Manchester, and you do a lot of reflective practice. How is that important to progress you, not just during the STP, but once you've finished as well. You should always be looking back and thinking, oh, what could I do next time? Or, how can I take what I've learnt to then put it into practice and modify? So yes, that was the first year. And then the second and third years, they are a lot more clinically based, relevant specifically to embryology. So you would be expected to learn, lab procedures such as collections, fertilization checks, talking to patients, and some of them included, specifically sort of, how would you report bad news, or if you needed to convert patients for different treatments, how would you go about doing that? And it's not just a simple, I would say this, there's a lot of things you have to consider, and especially how you would communicate to the patients, and then it pretty much takes you through into the third year where you'd move on to more advanced techniques such as embryo freezing, thawing, egg freezing, and also leading on to ICSI, not necessarily doing the ICSI procedure itself, but learning how to set up the microscope, learning how to catch sperm. If you are able to obviously do some ICSI, that's also really good as well. But normally, as long as you've got the principles behind and you manage to do a bit of training, you'd be able to write enough about it, and then hopefully then continue that training when you'd finish, if you hadn't been able to start real cases. So yeah.
Right. That's a lot to cover in 3 years.
Yeah. And then you've
To
got the
do,
master
yeah, yeah,
as well, because you complete a research project,
yeah,
you have a presentation, there's also exams, and it sounds like it was a lot now that I'm thinking back to it, but
yeah,
it felt quite structured. Like you had, enough notice to, complete these assessments. You also get a study day once a week, which was really nice. You could spend wherever you had a certain day, you could complete a lot of your work. And yeah, that was really nice as well. So definitely needed.
yeah, yeah. It is structured, but was there any point during your time in STP that you thought this is getting too much now? And the workload is so high when you have to do practical procedures at the clinic and also masters at the same time. So was there any point that you felt there's too much to do at the same time?
For me, I thought it was okay,
Okay.
but I think it was because I'd had training beforehand. A lot of the procedures that you would be learning in, that were part of the curriculum for your second and third year, I had already begun training on them either before I started STP, or I was really able to train on them quite early on, which again helped take off the pressure from that. I don't know. I think I can't say for certain, but I would imagine if I had gone in with no experience, I think it may have been quite a lot to manage. And potentially it would have led to a lot of, working outside of your study day and perhaps on weekends. And frankly, I didn't, unless it was like, for deadlines or exams, I really didn't have to go through that. But I can imagine there were, that you could get into that position, and it could be a lot. But yeah, I thought it was okay. There was a point where, obviously when you have in the final year where you have your end of year assessment, and you've also got a lot to trade because you need to have 100% of your portfolio completed, and you forget that even though your deadline is mid-September, your actual deadline is earlier because you need to get your work sent off. You need to get your training officers to give you feedback. You need to do your corrections and resubmit them. So whereas in the previous years, there was expected completion dates sort of every year for a certain number of training activities, but you had a little bit of leeway where, if you submitted them by a deadline, you could get your feedback a little bit later. But when it comes to the third year, it's like, no, this is the deadline. And if you've not submitted everything by a certain date, you'd have some explaining to do. Or yeah, so I guess in the third year, it kind of does catch up on you. You think, oh, I've got this whole year, which you do, but a lot happens in the year. You have, the project as well, which eats up a lot of your time, and the exams, a lot of them were in person. So that also takes up your time because you're having to travel to Manchester. But it was okay. Like, it was okay.
Right. It was challenging, but still manageable. You get the worth out of it, I think,
Yeah,
after
and I
doing the
think a
course.
key
Yeah.
part is always keep your, your colleagues and your
Yeah.
training officers in the loop. Like it's really important to have meetings with them, where you're like, you're just very open about, this is what I'm doing good at. These are things I need, support with. And I had a very supportive team, and for sure, if it wasn't, for my team, I would not have, gotten through it. They were very understanding, and every time I needed, something, it was like, yes, of course, like let's help you get through this. So yeah, so communication is key as well.
Right.
So,
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. So you do a lot of clinical work, as in the actual stuff in the lab. Is there anything that you do which is non-clinical, maybe on the admin side as well?
uh, so I also do temperature mapping in the lab itself. So this is just for the heated stages and also the ICSI rigs. So we tend to do this every quarter. I will prepare some dishes. I will go around and I will pop them on the heated stage and in the locations that we would use them for to mimic the procedures that are happening there. Obviously, temperature is really important that it's as stable and as close to the value that we want it to be. And even though we calibrate and check everything, at the start of the year or after shutdowns, it's going to change depending on the actual lab conditions as well. So it's important that if we find that because we have like probes which can detect if they'll have like their own alarm limits on the actual stage as well. It's important that if we see things aren't right, they're always going to alarm that we investigate, and also just every quarter, just do a check to see that we're happy that nothing needs adjusting. Because we always want to make sure that we're giving the best environment we can for all of our gametes and embryos that are on the heated stage. And then my other admin job is I am part of the embryo consent team. So we are part of the Bring Forward system where we are putting patients who are going to expire within a certain time frame, and we would be contacting them, sending them statutory notices, just to let them know about their samples and what they'd like to do, and send them the relevant consent forms. Also, talk to them if they've got any queries or any other support they need. So I'm also part of that team as well. And I mentioned in the previous episode as well, I am working towards becoming a training officer as well for future STPs. So yeah.
Nice, nice. Can you just tell us in short how you do the temperature mapping, as in what exactly you do?
Oh yeah. So it depends on each hood because we've got open and closed hoods. So firstly, it depends what hood and what procedures are going on there. But I will prepare the same or similar culture media and the same dishes that we would use. And I would have a fluke. So it will have a temperature probe, and I will try to mimic, for example, if it's an egg collection, I will try and mimic the length of time that dishes are typically kept there in those locations in the same conditions, and I will monitor the temperature to check that it's pretty much consistent. Or if there is a slight, for example, when you're taking media out of the incubator, it's gonna drop slightly just in that, it's a very short time, it's out of the incubator. So you want to make sure you're pouring it onto your heater stage, putting on your oil, like, as soon as possible and covering them. And so I'm going to mimic that process just to see, does that impact massively? And if there is a slight decrease, is the hood able to bring that back up to what it should be? And also making sure it doesn't go past our range of being an acceptable safe temperature. And when that does happen, obviously you have to begin troubleshooting. So that's when it gets a little bit, oh no, I have to try and figure out why this is happening, because sometimes it might just be just to repeat, was it a fluke? Like, did this mean to happen? And if you find out it's actually reading quite cold, I would then check what are the actual lab conditions today. Is it colder in the lab than what it normally is? I'd go back and look at the other monitoring data. And then I would then consider maybe increasing, letting that settle, and then you just repeat the process until you're happy that it's as it should be. And then I'd always, talk to my seniors just to make sure that as well, show them my findings before I make any big changes, and just check that we're all happy to go ahead. And then once that's all done for that specific hood, we would then change the alarm limits for the probe because if we've changed what the set points are going to be, then it's going to be reading different to what it thinks is normal. And so we need to adjust that as well so it's not going to alarm. And then essentially you would then monitor and make sure that it's also then being stable when you then use it going forward, because you don't want to find it's massively fluctuating because then it needs investigating again. So yeah, so when it goes perfectly fine, it can be quite a quick thing to do, but when you need to troubleshoot a lot, it can be quite time consuming, but obviously worth it in the end.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Nice. That's still, I mean, I feel like this is also a lot of work, even apart from all the clinical work that you do. Temperature mapping must be time consuming, and it's such an important part of the lab as well.
yeah.
If everything else is fine, but the temperature is not fine, nothing's going to still work. Yeah, makes sense. So what's next for Mary after STP? Now that you have done exactly what you wanted, you're now a registered clinical embryologist. What next? Are you thinking of doing a PhD or any other course?
um I wouldn't say a PhD is on
Yeah,
my mind at the moment. Um, I would like to progress with more training. So at the moment, when I mentioned about I'm doing ICSI cases in the last episode, I'd like to move on to more difficult samples. So I've not had any real experience in very poor quality samples, such as like a micro TT sample. Also maybe using a dish. That's something I'd like to also learn to do. And then after that, I would like to maybe next year move on to learning how to do embryo biopsy, embryo tubing. Um, so yeah, that's currently what my goals are, but they can always change. But in terms of any sort of research, not on my mind just yet. I think I've got a few more clinical
right.
procedures I've become proficient on. And once I've done those, then I can reassess what I'd like to do next. So,
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Right. So just a few more questions to whoever wanting to get into this field, starting to the start, wanting to start a career in IVF. What would you suggest for someone who is maybe in school, in college, or very early in their educational part of their life? What would you suggest?
I would suggest if it's something they have an interest in, if they're able to, maybe see if they can, get some work experience, or if they are able to speak to people that are in the field, um, and get their perspective on what actually happens, because I know like when you're younger you can set in your mind, oh, I want to do this job as my future career, and then you might actually realize, oh, it's not what I thought it was going to be. So I say definitely try and get some experience in it. I know it can be really difficult as well, but if just speak to people and reach out to labs or clinics to see if they do offer work experience, or just to come and see, or even just to speak to staff. There's also careers events that you can attend, and you get the option to speak to, again, people that are doing it or people that have done the training. Especially like for the STP, like it's not just embryology, there's many other disciplines you can do. So yeah, just I'd say that's probably that would be my advice. But if it's something you know that you really want to do, look at the pathway to get in, so that if there are specific educational requirements, you need to know if you would be able to achieve that, and you don't want to go off and study something to then find out, oh, that's not actually the right degree that you needed to do. So I say do your research before you commit to something, so that you want to keep your options open essentially. So
Makes sense. Makes sense. Are there any cons or any things that you need to be aware of before getting into this career? It might look very nice on the outside, but are there any things that you realize after actually starting the work in the lab that these are the things that I was not aware of, but maybe now these matter much?
I don't know actually. I think like with more clinical work, I think a lot of people that don't do clinical work, they might just think a working week is Monday to Friday, for example. Whereas once you do clinical work, we don't stop on the weekend. So that's something to bear in mind. You're not working every weekend, but for example, in my clinic, I generally work once a weekend, and we our work goes in cycles where for every day we're having an egg collection, we're going to have patients at different stages in their lab treatment. So just something to be aware of, that your work week isn't going to be a simple Monday to Friday. There will be times when you'll have to come in on the weekend, but again, it's I knew that going into the field, and I wouldn't have it any other way. You want to, it's an important part of the job, and so I think that's it really. Yeah, I think it's also, when you're doing with the patient facing and all the updates you have to do as well, just important to know that it's quite sensitive work, and it can sometimes impact you where, you can feel quite sad. But it's just things like that to know. Like it's not an easy job. Like it's, it can be tough, sort of mentally as well, but worth it for sure in the end, especially when you get to see how many patients you're benefiting in a positive way. And yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. I think that answers the question.
It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, like you said, that there'll always be few things
Yeah.
that you wouldn't know before getting into that career, but there's always going to be some advantages and disadvantages at the same time. But just what matters to you, I think. Yeah. Right. So last few questions, the last couple of questions. We have seen, especially you more than me, have seen a lot of technological advances in this field. Maybe there were some procedures that you used to do differently previously, but now because of technology and other research parts, maybe there are some procedures that you do a bit differently now. So coming to the point of 50 years down the line, where do you see embryology or IVF in future?
Wow, I hope the robots haven't taken over us, because I think the human element you'll never ever get to replace. But
Do
definitely
you
in
think
my
that would ever
time,
happen that robots are working in the lab instead of humans?
I would have thought you can optimize processes as much as possible, but you can never replace the human element to it, especially when it comes to, speaking to patients. Like I don't think you can, I don't know, we'll see in 50 years' time, but I would have thought that's not something you could ever really, replace. Even with the amount of AI that's developing or all the innovation that's going on. But what I have seen in the time that I've been working has mainly been things like changes to um, like maybe our consumables, and also procedures where we are making them more efficient. Like an example that we've had recently is we've moved on to what we call ultra rapid warming of embryos, where in the past to warm an embryo, it would typically take around about 12 to 15 minutes, depending on the media you use, whereas now it's 2 minutes. So that's obviously
Okay.
optimized this. It's definitely like we've seen a shift in optimization of procedures. And I think the next thing that may be rolled out in the next year or so will also be ultra rapid vitrification. So I guess the freezing of embryos, potentially eggs. So I'm excited to see how that pans out over the next few years, because as we take on more work, it's one of the ways to sort of, I guess, compensate for it is to optimize processes so that we can do them in a more efficient way. And there's also been a lot of AI innovation in terms of like embryo morphokinetics. So a lot of our patients, they'll go into time lapse incubator, and again, like when I first started, we used to do a lot of the annotations. They'd be guided on the viewer, but we would manually annotate them ourselves. Whereas now we still do some annotations, but we do less, and we tend to wait until the sort of last stage. And there's now software integrated into the time lapse footage where it can give scores for embryos for, for example, likelihood for implantation, and that they can be like, I wouldn't we wouldn't use those as, oh, this is a definite, but they're definitely useful tools to have, especially when you're making decisions on, oh, which embryo should we transfer when, for example, you like they're all like, top quality embryos. Sometimes it can be a bit difficult to pick, and they can be tools which you can use and see, oh, what does this software thing. But again, we'd always discuss and wouldn't just take that as, oh, that's what, yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to see. There's a lot that can be done to optimize processes, but hopefully, I'd hope the human element to IVF will always stay there.
Right, right. I think since there's a lot of emotional side to this field as well, which I don't think any robot or any technology can replace. You need a human for that, which is
Yeah,
quite important in this field. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Right. So coming to the last question that we asked every guest on this podcast, how do you define embryology or IVF treatment in one word?
Ooh. I'd say it's dynamic, so it's always
Okay.
changing. Like you can never really pinpoint anything at any given time because it's always evolving, it's always changing. The embryos are always growing and changing. So yeah, I'd say it's dynamic. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Mary, for your time today for doing both the
Is
episodes. It was really nice getting to know what actually happens in the lab and also how someone very early in their career, or maybe who hasn't even started, can get into this field. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. And also thank you to our listeners to listening to both the episodes. If you have more questions, you can always ask us in the comment box on YouTube. We are also going to provide our LinkedIn handles in the description. You can directly connect us on LinkedIn and ask if you have any more questions. Thank you so much. That's the end of part 2. Thank you, Mary, for your time. See you soon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.